How do you decide which influence and persuasion approaches to use in a situation? Is there, like, do you have an order that you think like one's more
Yes.
powerful than another? Or how do you approach that?
Well, here's where we use those 6 principles,
Okay.
right? To get people, so we give them evidence that this is what authorities believe, this is social proof, a lot of people like you, this is a scarce opportunity, this is consistent with commitments you have made. So you get them to focus by using one or another of those principles of influence on your product first or service. And because we're so busy, when we see that this is a satisfactory solution, you don't go and check out all the others.
Right.
This is enough. I'm too busy. No, this is a good one. Look at all the people who say it is. Or that's enough for me. I'm going to satisfice right here and not check out the competition.
And satisficing is a combination of?
Suffice and satisfaction.
Okay.
So it's sufficient to produce satisfaction. That's all I need. I'm not going to produce the optimal one. That's going to take too much time and energy to comb through all of the pros and cons of various. No. This is good. It's good enough. I want this decision to be gone now.
I loved your idea for job interviewees about pre-framing the interview by asking 2 questions before it starts. Could you share those 2 questions? Because I think that this applies to everything, not just job interviews.
It applies to sales settings as well. So you know how if you go to a job interview, you typically face an evaluator or sometimes a group of maybe 2 or 3 of them in a room, and you are trained to say, I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to answer all of the questions that you have for me, right? And you stop and you let them fire. I'm going to suggest that you persuade what they say to you by saying, but before we begin, I have a question for you. I'm curious. Why did you invite me here today? What was it about my candidacy that was attractive? And what you will experience is these people going into their materials and describing all the good things about you, your experience, your credentials, your traits, and the interview will proceed from that platform. Right? I have a colleague, not a colleague, he's an acquaintance who claims he's gotten 3 better jobs in a row by using this strategy. He said he was even in one interview where there were 3 people evaluating them, and they each came up with a different reason. Oh, well, it's how consistent you are with the values of our organization, or it's your background.
Which then cements that as a fact, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah. Yes, and now they were arguing with one another about why they should hire him, for the reason they should hire him.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think you can do that in a sales situation where you have competition against other rivals. Can you tell us why you decided that we would be one of your? Right? Now they're going to be talking about all of the positive features of you, your products, your service.
So speaking of rivals, when we're in a sales situation, sometimes we're asking people to switch from the status quo to something new. A lot of times when we're offering products or services, we're trying to convince people to move to our thing from something else.
Right.
How should we approach that?
Well, we've already talked about one thing, about raising the idea of adventurousness to mind, right? We could ask the question. We could have a
97% of everyone surveyed, by the way, says they're adventurous.
Says they're adventurous.
97%. Those 3% are so boring.
But you could ask something associated with adventurous. But here's the one that lends itself to change that we typically don't recognize. If you have a message for change, not any kind of message, but a message for change, you will be more successful if you send it in the first week of the month than the last week of the month, because something has just changed. Change is in the air, right? Change is in mind. Better still, that's true if you send your message for change on Monday or Tuesday than Thursday or Friday. It's the beginning of something. It's something new, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then also you said, I think, that we want to persuade people that they have new information, that now with that new information, had they gone back in time and they were making the same decision to choose the thing that is the status quo now, they would make the decision now to do our thing. I said that not in a very complicated way. He's going to say it easier.
This is a very good point. So sometimes you are rowing against the current. Somebody's already made a choice.
The incumbent, right?
The incumbent.
Yep.
And you've got the commitment and consistency principle working against you. These people are going to want to be consistent with what they've already done and justify that. Right? If you ask them this question, we were doing some consulting for a pharmaceutical company, and after their prescribers, the doctors, chose a different drug, right, some other company's drug, they sent their salespeople, their sales reps, to say, so we're curious, why did you decide for this? And what the doctors said was, well, it's got this advantages and this advantage and this advantage. That's the wrong thing. You don't want the doctors investing their memory with the strengths of your rivals. That's like the reverse of what you want to do. So what we say instead is to say, well, tell me, if there was one thing about the drug you're currently using that you would like to change, what would it be? Now they're thinking about deficits, not benefits.
Right.
So then, right, you can say, oh, well, here's what we have to offer, right? That's new, or that perhaps you didn't know. So you didn't make the wrong decision 2 years ago when you decided, or last year when you decided.
Right.
If you were to say, you made the wrong decision, their back would get up and they wouldn't want to hear it. You didn't make the wrong decision. You made the right decision at the time. But this moment is different than last year. There's something new that can be provided. So to continue to be a good decision maker, you'll want to consider...
And consistent.
And consistent
right.
with being a good decision maker, deciding on the best evidence. This is the place to choose now, yeah.
So just a couple more quick things. How do you decide which influence and persuasion approaches to use in a situation? Is there, like, do you have an order that you think, like, one's more
Yes.
powerful than another? Or how do you approach that?
I'm going to answer that 2 ways. One is to be sure that you don't have a favorite approach that you use across situations. I had a colleague who studied for 3.5 years the question, or he tried to answer, what is the single most effective sales tactic, right? And I saw him at a conference and he said, I found it. The single most effective sales tactic is not to have a single sales tactic. That's naive. That's ridiculous. All right. So you don't want it. You want to go into every situation looking for what's there available. Is there true scarcity there? Use it. Is there true authority? Use it. Is there true commitment that they've already made that they could be considered? Use it. All right. The other thing is to say there's certain levels of relationship. If the relationship is new, use reciprocity and liking to build the relationship. Right? There's another level where people feel good about you, but they're uncertain of whether to choose. Use social proof and authority. That reduces uncertainty of what you are saying is the right thing. But then when you've got those 2 things and you want people to move, use commitment and consistency. This is what you've said, this is what's next. Or scarcity. You have to go now,
Right.
otherwise you will lose. Those are the things that mobilize people after you've got the first two things in place.
So now you also said that you think that there is a seventh principle to influence.
Yes.
What is that?
That's the principle of unity, the idea that we share a common identity. And I'll give you a quick example of how we can use that. You know, one of the things we love to do is co-creation with our customers, prospects, clients, and so on. Help us develop the next model, the next generation of what we have to offer. Tell us what you're going to appreciate about this. And then we will, together with you, in this partnership, develop that optimal next generation. Right? That's brilliant to do that. We want a partner. Very often mistakenly say to those individuals, can you give us your opinion on this? When you ask for someone's opinion, that person takes a half step back from you and becomes a critic. If instead you change one word and ask for that person's advice, he or she takes a half step towards you psychologically.
It's a huge insight.
Yes,
Really.
you have persuaded them to be a partner with that one word, advice. And in fact, research shows that when you ask for advice on some new initiative, people are not only more favorable to it, before they experience it, they feel a closer bond with you because you've asked them to be a collaborator with you rather than a critic of you.
That's great. What is the best way for anybody that wants to find out more about you and persuasion and influence?
Oh,
to do
the
that?
easiest way would be to go to our website,
Okay.
www.influenceatwork, that's all one word, influenceatwork.com.
Awesome. In parting, what would you say besides persuasion and influence, what is the book that you give the most of any book that you believe is fantastic that someone else has written?
I give Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely.
Awesome. Let's give Bob a big hand. Thank you so much for coming in.